The night air in Oakwood Heights carried the scent of rain and jasmine as Darius Daniels stood at the edge of the university library's third-floor balcony. Below him, students crossed the quad in laughing clusters, their futures bright with possibility. Darius gripped the railing tighter, his knuckles whitening. In his pocket, a letter from the university's financial office felt like it weighed 100 pounds. "I know what you did, Darius." He turned to find Dean Elijah Washington standing in the doorway, arms crossed over his chest, disappointment etched into the lines of his face. The older man had been Darius's mentor since he'd arrived from overseas 3 years ago, the first person to believe in him, to see past his accent and recognize his potential. "The scholarship fund is missing $15,000, Dean Washington said, stepping closer. "Money that was supposed to help students who couldn't afford books or housing. Students just like you were when you arrived. Welcome to Silent Crime Witness, where we bring you the darkest true crime stories that shake communities to their core. If this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button and comment your location below. Your support helps us continue sharing these important stories that might otherwise remain untold." Heidelberg, Germany, 2004. Richmond Gruber, a smart, handsome, and ambitious young man, grows up poor, but his days are rich with American television. On his 24th birthday, he packs his bags and flies to the United States to pursue the American dream. Cox's Street, Kentucky. Gruber's tourist visa allows him to stay in the country for just 2 months, but he wants to stay for good. He meets a local student, Virginia Potts, at the campus library. She's attractive but looks lonely. Gruber introduces himself. "I'm Richard." 1 month and 29 days later, they marry. "I do," Richmond says, sealing a marriage of convenience that would change the course of his life forever. He borrows money from Virginia and enrolls as a freshman at the college. Richmond, a finance major, and Virginia, a biology major, volunteer for a nonprofit organization to protect the endangered American wolf. Richmond becomes the campus treasurer, but all is not as it seems. The fluorescent lights of the campus library buzzed overhead as Richmond sorted through donation receipts. The clock showed 11:42 p.m. Most students had left hours ago, but Richmond often worked late. Partly because he needed the job, partly because the quiet emptiness reminded him of late nights in Germany watching American shows and dreaming of a different life. The sound of footsteps broke his concentration. "Mr. Gruber, I need to talk to you." Richmond looked up to see Don Spicer, the campus president of their nonprofit organization. Don's usually friendly face was tight with concern, his shoulders rigid beneath his Letterman jacket. "It's late, Don," Richmond said, forcing a smile. "Can it wait until tomorrow?" "No, it can't." Don pulled up a chair, sitting uncomfortably close. "I've been reviewing our accounts. There's $10,000 missing and the withdrawals all have your signature." Richmond's heart hammered against his ribs, but his expression remained neutral, a skill he'd perfected over years of hiding his true thoughts. "There must be some mistake. I've documented everything carefully." "I checked twice," Don insisted, his voice hardening. "It's $10,000 missing from our account and we need to find out why." Richmond's mind raced. The money had been so easy to take, small amounts at first, then larger sums as his confidence grew. No one had questioned him, his accent and foreign background made him seem trustworthy, incapable of such American crimes as embezzlement. "Perhaps there's a misunderstanding," Richmond suggested, buying time. "Let me show you my records." Don shook his head. "I've seen enough, Richmond. Either you return the money by tomorrow, or I'm going to the police." The word police sent a cold wave of panic through Richmond's body. Police meant investigation. Investigation meant his marriage to Virginia would be exposed as a fraud. His visa situation would be scrutinized. He would be deported, disgraced, his American dream shattered before it had truly begun. "Wait, President Spicer, wait." Richmond's voice echoed in the empty library as Don stood to leave. His hand reached out, grabbing the heavy metal donation box on the desk, the one with the wolf emblem that students dropped their spare change into. The sound it made against Don's skull was sickening, a dull crack followed by an awful silence. Don's body crumpled to the floor, blood pooling beneath his head on the polished linoleum. Richmond stood frozen, the donation box still clutched in his trembling hand. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the distant hum of the air conditioning system. "This wasn't supposed to happen," Richmond whispered, his accent thickening with stress. "Talk about your bad turn of events. This was a robbery that kind of turned into a murder, and once you've committed murder, there's no going back." Richmond's mind shifted into survival mode. He'd watched enough American crime shows to know what to do next. Carefully, he propped Don's body in a library chair, positioning an open book in his lap and arranging his head to rest against the high back of the chair. From a distance, it would look like Don had fallen asleep studying. This is interesting. Richmond isn't trying to hide the body, he's just trying to buy himself some time. He's got some time. He wiped the donation box clean of fingerprints and returned it to its place. He gathered his belongings, erased the security footage from the library's outdated system, and walked calmly through the empty building. On his way out of the campus, he sent a text message to Virginia, a fabricated family emergency requiring his immediate return to Germany. Then threw his phone into a dumpster behind the dining hall. With the stolen money, he paid cash for a bus ticket west. While Richmond was technically a fugitive, he'd given authorities no reason to suspect him of anything. He just looked like a foreign student who'd abandoned his studies and his wife. He'd left no evidence, no motive, no reason for anyone to connect him to Don Spicer's death. The Greyhound bus pulled away from the station at 4:17 a.m. carrying Richmond Gruber toward a new life and a new identity. As Kentucky disappeared behind him, he stared out the window at the darkness, already planning his transformation. Richmond, who spent thousands of hours watching American TV in the 90s, had arrived at the center of the entertainment industry. The Los Angeles sun beat down on his shoulders as he walked along Sunset Boulevard, taking in the palm trees and billboards that had once seemed like fantasy. "Hi, I'm Rich Roberts," he said to the receptionist at Apex Talent Agency, his German accent completely erased, replaced by the neutral tones of American television. He handed over his resume, a masterpiece of fiction describing his background as an ex-Harvard law student who dropped out to pursue screenwriting. Rich applies for an entry-level job in the mailroom, a position far beneath his abilities but perfect for his purposes: low profile, minimal background checking, and access to the inner workings of Hollywood. A lot of people, when they're trying to keep their identity secret, move to a totally different kind of place. That's what Rich Roberts did. But he has to play by the rules. He still needs papers. What he does is he finds the name of a deceased child, a child who was born about the same time he was. Then he gets a copy of the birth certificate and he uses that to get a new social security number. Rich even gets a driver's license so that when the talent agency runs a background check on him, not only do all of his papers come up, but he comes up squeaky clean. The mailroom job pays barely above minimum wage, and Rich is quickly burning through the money he stole. He lives in a cramped hostel in Koreatown, eating ramen noodles and saving every penny he can. But Rich is nothing if not resourceful. "Hi, how are you?" The voice belongs to Denise Hawkins, a 51-year-old screenwriter whose glory days writing for network dramas in the 90s have given way to sporadic work and a growing dependence on vodka martinis. Rich gives her his most charming smile, the one he's practiced in mirrors since arriving in America. "I'm great, Ms. Hawkins. Can I get you anything else? Another drink, perhaps?" They're at an agency mixer, the kind where established clients mingle with executives while support staff like Rich serve drinks and collect business cards. Denise isn't a major client anymore, but she still gets invited to these events, a courtesy based on past success and industry relationships. "Call me Denise," she insists, her hand lingering on his arm. "And yes, another martini would be lovely." Rich notices everything about Denise. The designer dress that's a season out of date, the slightly too heavy makeup, the wedding ring tan line on her finger. He sees opportunity. Within a week, Rich moves out of his hostel and into Denise's beautiful Beverly Hills home. He tells her he's just renting a room, but they both know it's more than that. At night, he slips into her bedroom, offering the physical affection and attention she's been starved for since her divorce. "Yeah, I was in Harvard Law," he tells her over breakfast, spinning elaborate tales of his fictional past. "But I realized I wanted to create stories, not just negotiate contracts for them." He tells her about his childhood in rural Pennsylvania, his correspondence with Francis Ford Coppola, his unpublished novel that just needs the right editor. It's all a lie, of course, but he's really good at telling lies. All of these guys are, and they have no moral problem with doing it. It's just part of doing business. "I know he's so fun. I'm so happy he's here," Denise tells her friends, showing Rich off at industry parties where he charms everyone with his knowledge of film and television. Knowledge gleaned from a lifetime of obsessive viewing rather than actual experience. "Mom, I'm home." The voice echoes through the house one afternoon, followed by the thud of a duffel bag hitting the marble floor. Rich freezes. a glass of Denise's expensive scotch halfway to his lips. He wasn't expecting anyone else. Denise had mentioned a son, but said he was deployed overseas with the military. John. Oh my God. Denise rushes past Rich to embrace a tall, muscular man in his early 30s. Why didn't you tell me you were coming home? Wanted to surprise you, John says, his eyes moving past his mother to fix on Rich with immediate suspicion. Who's this? This is Rich Roberts, Denise says, her voice suddenly nervous. He's renting the guest room. He works at Apex and wants to be a writer. Not really, John, Rich. The introductions are awkward, the tension immediate. John Hawkins is a military intelligence officer in the Marines, home on unexpected leave after an injury during training. He senses something flimsy about Rich's charming stories. John's a sharp guy. In the service, you meet a lot of people, you see a lot of things, and your BS detector is at high game. That first night, John hears Rich sneaking into his mother's bedroom. The sound of her giggling, followed by other noises, confirms what he already suspected. This tenant is sleeping with his recently divorced, emotionally vulnerable mother. The next day, while Rich is at work and Denise is at her weekly hair appointment, John conducts his own investigation. He picks the lock on Rich's bedroom door, a skill acquired during military training, and methodically searches the room. What he finds disturbs him deeply. Rich's possessions are minimal for someone supposedly settled in Los Angeles. His clothes still have price tags hidden inside collars and waistbands as if recently purchased to create a wardrobe. Most concerning, John finds a German tourist visa tucked inside a copy of The Firm by John Grisham, a visa issued to someone named Richmond Gruber. John takes photos of everything with his phone, then carefully returns items to their exact positions. He keeps the visa, tucking it into his wallet as evidence. That evening, the three share an uncomfortable dinner. Denise drinks too much wine and tries too hard to generate conversation between the two men in her life. John watches Rich with the focused attention of a predator studying prey. Rich maintains his charm offensive, but internally he's calculating risks and escape routes. The confrontation comes the next morning. John is having breakfast, black coffee, and protein shake when Rich walks into the kitchen. Morgan, John says casually, the German greeting hanging in the air between them. Rich does a double take but recovers quickly. Good morning to you, too. I didn't know you spoke German. Picked up a little during a deployment, John lies smoothly. You seem familiar with it yourself. Rich shrugs, pouring himself coffee. Studied abroad in Berlin for a semester. Beautiful language, beautiful country. Interesting, John says, pulling the tourist visa from his pocket and sliding it across the counter. Because this says you're not just familiar with Germany. It says you're from there. The color drains from Rich's face as he stares at the visa, the document he thought was safely hidden, the tangible link to his true identity. How do you explain this? John asks, his voice deadly quiet. Rich's mind races through possible explanations, discarding each as too implausible. The silence stretches between them, broken only by the distant sound of Denise's shower running upstairs. You need to get out of this house, John says finally. Today. I don't know what your game is, but I won't let you take advantage of my mother. Richmond Gruber, an aspiring German immigrant, tries to achieve the American dream, but a school administrator, Don Spicer, discovers that Richmond has been stealing money from the organization. Richmond accidentally kills Don and leaves for Los Angeles. He poses as Rich Roberts and charms his way into the life of an alcoholic divorcee, Denise Hawkins, but Denise's son discovers some conflicting information. Rich knows he's cornered, but cornered animals are the most dangerous. Sorry, we got off on the wrong foot, okay? He says, forcing a conciliatory smile. Look, I admit I haven't been completely honest about my background. Immigration issues, you know? But my feelings for your mother are genuine. John's expression makes it clear he doesn't believe a word. You have until tonight to pack your things and disappear. If you're still here when I get back from my appointment at the VA, I'm calling immigration. Rich nods, appearing to accept defeat. Can we at least talk about this first? Man to man? I've got some beer in the fridge. Good German stuff, not that American piss water. John hesitates. He shouldn't trust this man, but military bravado makes it difficult to back down from a direct challenge. Fine. One beer. Then you're gone. They move to the backyard patio away from the house where Denise might overhear their conversation. Rich retrieves 2 bottles from the refrigerator, opening both and handing one to John. To understanding, Rich says, raising his bottle. John takes a long swallow, his eyes never leaving Rich's face. Start talking. Who are you really? Rich launches into a story about fleeing Germany to escape gambling debts, about creating a new identity to start fresh in America. It's a lie, but one designed to appeal to John's sense of honor, a man who made mistakes but is trying to rebuild his life. As he talks, Rich watches John's eyes. Watches for the slight unfocusing that indicates the rohypnol he slipped into John's beer is taking effect. You're full of shit, John slurs, his military training fighting against the drug's influence. He tries to stand but stumbles, knocking over his beer bottle. What did you do? Rich catches him as he collapses, lowering him gently to the patio floor. Shoo, he soothes, as if comforting a child. Just sleep now. Everything will be fine. But everything will not be fine. Not for John Hawkins. In Denise's basement, Rich pulls out a chainsaw and does his best Leatherface impression. John, passed out from the rohypnol in his drink, is asleep on the floor. Rich takes him apart. He'd already killed once, so he was willing to kill again, but in order to keep the ruse going, he had to eliminate evidence. What the genius didn't know is that when you use a chainsaw, you splatter blood and flesh on the floor, the walls, even the ceiling. While trying to eliminate evidence, he multiplied it 1,000 times. The basement becomes a slaughterhouse. Rich works frantically, dismembering John's body with the chainsaw he found among the gardening tools. Blood sprays across his face, his clothes, the concrete walls. The noise is deafening, but the basement is soundproofed, a feature Denise had mentioned was added by the previous owner, a music producer who needed space for late-night recording sessions. After Rich has murdered John, he works at a furious pace to thoroughly clean up the basement. He wraps the body parts in plastic sheeting from Denise's gardening supplies, then buries them in the backyard beneath a decorative koi pond that has been under construction for weeks. The timing is perfect, fresh dirt won't look suspicious in an area already being excavated. He showers, changes clothes, and burns his bloodied garments in the outdoor fire pit, explaining to a neighbor who questions the smoke that he's just getting rid of some old papers. By the time Denise returns home that evening, Rich is in bed, pretending to sleep. She wakes him with a gentle kiss, unaware that just hours earlier he had butchered her son in their basement. Where's John? She asks the next morning, noticing her son's absence at breakfast. Rich delivers the lie he's carefully prepared. He got a call last night while you were out. Some kind of top-secret directive from the Marines. He seemed really excited about it, said it was the opportunity he'd been waiting for. He left without saying goodbye? Denise looks hurt, confused. He tried calling you, but your phone was off, Rich says, the lie flowing smoothly. He said to tell you he loves you and he'll be in touch when he can. You know how these military operations are all very hush-hush. Denise nods slowly, accepting the explanation because it fits with what she knows of her son's career. I just wish I'd seen him before he left. It was such a short visit. He seemed disappointed too, Rich assures her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. But duty calls, right? Almost a year has passed, and John Hawkins has not returned to his mother Denise like Rich told her he was. Rich has one more loose end to tie up. First, he quits his job and doesn't answer any more calls, texts, or emails. He plans to poison Denise by tainting her drink. Denise's drinking has worsened over the months since John's deployment. She worries constantly about her son's safety, checking news reports for any mention of Marine casualties. Rich encourages her anxiety, knowing it drives her deeper into the bottle. Tonight, he's prepared a special martini for her favorite cocktail with a lethal addition. He watches as she sips it, smiling at him over the rim of the glass. You're so good to me, she slurs, already on her third drink of the evening. Don't know what I'd do without you. You'll never have to find out, Rich promises, the lie bitter on his tongue. But fate has other plans. Denise is at home drinking alone, as usual. At this point, she has no idea what drink she's on. She starts to feel a little queasy and heads to the bathroom to throw up. She mistakenly slips and hits her head on the hard porcelain rim and passes away. Rich walks up to the house with a bottle of wine and the rohypnol. He smells something nasty in the air. He walks in and sees something he never expected. Denise is dead. Rich suddenly realizes his job is done here and slowly walks away. The discovery of Denise drinking herself to death has wrapped up a few loose ends for Rich, but he has to push the reset button now because there's another dead body in his life, which means a new name, a new location, a new job, and more. Rich decides to take off in John's new car. He needs cash fast, and one way to do that is to sell John's vehicle. Rich posts an ad to sell the car on some online classifieds but decides he has only one option at this point, and that's to ditch the ride and leave. Ditching the car is really the smartest and the only thing Rich can do because a lot of people don't realize cars have their own fingerprints. It's called the vehicle identification number, and as soon as you enter that into computer databases, it tells you everything from the day it was built to the last owner. Rich abandons the car in a long-term parking lot at LAX, wiping it clean of fingerprints and leaving the keys in the ignition. He takes a bus to Las Vegas, carrying only a backpack with essential items and $45,000 in cash, Denise's emergency fund that she kept in a home safe, the combination of which she had shared with Rich during a drunken moment of intimacy. Rich knows it's time to shift gears and start the next chapter in his life. Meanwhile, a reality TV house-flipping show is filming a renovation of Denise Hawkins' home, except they don't say that the previous owner died there. The owner decides that he wants to install a brand new pool. During the renovation, he discovers the remains of a mutilated body. Cut! Cut! The director's voice rings out across the backyard as the excavator operator jumps from his machine, retching into the freshly dug earth. The camera crew rushes forward, then recoils at the sight, plastic-wrapped bundles containing unmistakably human remains. Production assistants usher neighbors away as police cars arrive, sirens wailing. Crime scene technicians in white suits carefully extract the decomposing packages from the soil. The medical examiner will later confirm what we already know. These are the remains of John Hawkins, missing for 14 months and presumed to be on a classified military mission. The authorities are not able to make an ID immediately, but forensic analysis will eventually confirm the victim's identity through dental records and DNA. So now Denise and her son John are the two roads that will take us to the true identity of Rich Roberts, but they're both dead. So we're left with no leads, no evidence, nothing that will tell us that Rich Roberts killed John and Denise. Except for one thing, John Hawkins was a meticulous man who didn't trust easily. Before confronting Rich, he had emailed himself photos of the German visa and other suspicious items found in Rich's room. He had also sent a text to his commanding officer expressing concerns about his mother's new boyfriend, including the name Richmond Gruber and a request for background information. These digital breadcrumbs, discovered months after the bodies are found, will eventually lead investigators to connect Rich Roberts to Richmond Gruber. But by then, both identities will be long abandoned. The murderer shapeshifter, formerly known as Richmond Gruber, then Rich Roberts, has now taken the identity of a high-roller professional poker player, Richard Regal. His charm and attitude make him appear as if he is perhaps from royalty and playing with an unlimited amount of funds. Las Vegas embraces Richard Regal. With his European sophistication, designer suits, and seemingly endless bankroll, he fits perfectly into the world of high-stakes poker. He rents a luxury apartment on the Strip, buys expensive watches and custom-tailored clothing, and cultivates the image of a professional gambler who travels the international circuit. In reality, he plays conservatively, losing small amounts deliberately to maintain his cover while living primarily off Denise's money. He studies the other players, learning their tells and techniques, gradually building his skills until he can hold his own in legitimate games. All in, Richard says coolly, pushing a stack of chips worth $50,000 into the center of the table. The other players, a tech billionaire, a Saudi prince, a retired NFL star, exchange glances. Richard's face reveals nothing, his eyes hidden behind designer sunglasses despite the dimly lit poker room. The tech billionaire folds. The Saudi prince hesitates, then calls. The NFL star curses under his breath and throws his cards down. Richard reveals his hand, a full house, kings over tens. The prince's flush isn't enough. As Richard rakes in the pot, he allows himself a small smile. Not because of the money, but because of the perfect execution of his performance. Richard Regal, international poker phenomenon, exists only because he wills it to be so. Meanwhile, John Hawkins' abandoned car is found in the long-term parking lot at LAX. The vehicle has accumulated hundreds of dollars in parking fees and was flagged for potential abandonment. When police run the VIN number, they discover it belongs to a Marine officer reported missing by his commanding officer over a year ago. Authorities determine then that Rich Roberts is a person of interest in his disappearance. An all-points bulletin for Rich Roberts goes out to the Las Vegas police and all the regional authorities. German immigrant Richmond Gruber is accused of stealing money and kills the accuser. He escapes to Los Angeles, changes his name to Rich Roberts, charms a wealthy alcoholic widow, and then kills her son John. Rich then heads to Las Vegas for a new role as Richard Regal. But the law's catching on to his game. Investigators find Richard's address and are surprised to discover that such a popular high roller actually lives on the outskirts of town, in a modest apartment that contradicts his flashy public persona. They break in, weapons drawn, but he's gone without a trace. Vanished just hours before their arrival, tipped off by a casino security guard who overheard police radio chatter. 1 month later, Rich Regal has relocated and is now masquerading as Rick Kennedy. He claims to be a distant relative of the famed Kennedy clan. Rick meets and quickly proposes to a real estate mogul, Kelly Davis, in Phoenix, Arizona. Kelly is everything Denise wasn't. Young, ambitious, clear-eyed, and in control of her life. Her real estate empire spans 3 states, with offices in Phoenix, Tucson, and Albuquerque. She's built her success through hard work and shrewd investments, turning a small inheritance into a multi-million-dollar business. "I've never met anyone like you," Rick tells her on their 3rd date, and for once, he's not lying. Kelly's intelligence and independence both attract and intimidate him. She's not easily charmed or manipulated, which makes her a challenge and a risk. But Rick is nothing if not adaptable. He presents himself as her equal, a self-made entrepreneur with old family connections but new money ambitions. He studies her business, offers insightful suggestions, and positions himself as both romantic partner and potential business ally. Rick is now on his 4th identity. And here's the problem. You've got Joe Schmo turning to John Doe. Well, Joe Schmo doesn't have fingerprints on file, neither does John Doe. Ultimately, you have to find the original person. Rick convinces Kelly to elope. He doesn't provide Kelly with much detail besides that most of his relatives have died or are too busy to attend a wedding. Kelly is okay with that, but she asks that Rick at least have a best man so her dog Oliver fulfills the duty. Come on, if you're getting married, that's something you got to look into. But maybe Kelly was afraid of what she'd find out. The wedding takes place at a luxury resort in Sedona, with only a handful of Kelly's closest friends in attendance. Rick stands beside her, repeating vows he doesn't mean to a woman whose wealth and status offer him the legitimacy he's always craved. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the justice of the peace declares, and Rick Kennedy, formerly Richard Regal, formerly Rich Roberts, formerly Richmond Gruber, kisses his bride, sealing yet another reinvention with a promise of forever that he has no intention of keeping. Kelly asks Rick to join her real estate empire. He does surprisingly well, having studied the business extensively before pursuing her. His charm and apparent sophistication appeal to wealthy clients, and the empire grows under their joint leadership. He also seems to enjoy his new life of luxury and hobnobbing with the Phoenix elite. Kelly gives birth to a son, Ricky. It is the first child for both. Rick holds his newborn son with trembling hands, overwhelmed by emotions he never expected to feel. This tiny, helpless creature is part of him, the first true connection he's had to another human being since leaving Germany. "He has your eyes," Kelly says softly, watching from her hospital bed. Rick nods, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. In this moment, he allows himself to believe in the possibility of redemption, of a life built on something other than lies and flight. Kelly is unwittingly living with a man who has murdered 2 people in cold blood, and now all he has to do is stay Rick Kennedy, and there's no reason for authorities to suspect him of anything. Phoenix, Arizona, 2009. Rick leads a great life, making lots of money, but he doesn't know how to manage his good fortune and spends recklessly. His taste for luxury, sports cars, designer clothes, expensive watches exceeds even their substantial income. More concerning to Kelly, he makes business decisions that prioritize quick profits over long-term stability. "We need to talk about the Westridge development," Kelly says one evening, spreading financial reports across their dining room table. "You authorized construction to begin before environmental clearances were finalized. That's a huge liability risk." Rick dismisses her concerns with a wave of his hand. "The clearances are a formality. I know people who can expedite the process." "That's not how I do business," Kelly says firmly. "We don't cut corners and we don't rely on knowing people. We follow the law." It's their first serious argument, but not their last. As months pass, Kelly grows increasingly concerned about Rick's business practices and spending habits. She loves him and he's a devoted father to Ricky, but something doesn't add up. Kelly hires a private investigator to look into Rick's life. The PIs uncover some troubling details about Rick, 1. He is not related to the Kennedys. 2. He has never been to Harvard as he claimed. And finally, he misappropriates funds, manipulates earnings, and writes off false expenses at Kelly's real estate agency, putting her company at risk of being audited and shut down. The PI presents Kelly with a thick folder of evidence: falsified expense reports, manipulated property valuations, tax documents with discrepancies that could trigger federal investigations. But most damning is the complete absence of any record of Rick Kennedy before his arrival in Phoenix. It's as if he didn't exist until 3 years ago, the investigator explains. No school records, no employment history, no tax filings. The social security number he's using belongs to a Richard Kennedy who died in infancy in 1980. Kelly needs to be very careful around Rick now, because while the PI has turned over the information about Rick's shady dealings with her company, the PI hasn't discovered the information about Rick being a serial killer. That night, Kelly watches Rick playing with their son, building block towers and laughing as Ricky knocks them down. How can this loving father be the same man who has systematically defrauded her company and constructed an entirely fictional identity? In a letter, Kelly has laid out the grounds for a divorce. She says she intends to get full custody of Ricky and has decided to relocate to London, England. She also says that if he fights custody, she will file criminal charges about his fraudulent financial records at the firm. "I know who you aren't, Rick," she writes. "I don't know who you are, but I know you've lied about everything: your name, your background, your education. I can't live with someone I don't know, and I won't allow my son to be raised by a man living a lie." She places the letter on Rick's pillow, then takes Ricky to her sister's house for the night, unwilling to face Rick's reaction immediately. When Rick finds the letter, his world collapses. The carefully constructed identity of Rick Kennedy, successful businessman and family man, shatters like glass. But it's not the threat of exposure that devastates him, it's the loss of his son. This time, Rick has hit a new low, but it could have been worse. Kelly could have had him busted for a whole bunch of things, even though she didn't know the cold, hard truth about his past. And now Rick can't even fight for custody of his son, because when you do that, you're giving people permission to look into your background, and if they looked into Rick's background, what would they find? Murder. A year later, with the divorce final, Rick faces a new harsh reality. He only gets to see his only son under court supervision 3 times a year. He spirals into a year-long depression. At this point, Rick is at his most vulnerable point. Sociopaths never care about anything, and they don't know what to do when they do, and Rick wants his son back. On a visit to Phoenix, Rick is ecstatic to see his son, even though a court supervisor is present. The two spend the afternoon playing sports and having a great time in a public park, Rick soaking in every moment with the child who has become the center of his emotional universe. "Daddy, I love really spending time with you," Ricky says as their visit nears its end, his small arms wrapped around Rick's neck in a tight hug. Something breaks inside Rick at that moment, some final barrier between the monster he's become and the human being he might have been. When the court supervisor announces it's time to leave, Rick makes a decision that will seal his fate. "I need to get something from my car," he tells the supervisor, walking toward the parking lot with Ricky's hand in his. "Just a gift I forgot to give him." The supervisor follows at a discreet distance, maintaining visual contact as required by the court order. When they reach Rick's car, he opens the front passenger door as if retrieving something. Then, with the fluid motion of someone who has planned this moment carefully, he turns and delivers a precise blow to the supervisor's temple, not enough to kill, just enough to stun. Before the man can recover, Rick has Ricky in the car and is peeling out of the parking lot, tires squealing on asphalt. "Where are we going, Daddy?" Ricky asks, confused by the sudden departure and his father's tense expression. "On an adventure," Rick says, forcing a smile as he checks the rearview mirror for pursuit. "Just you and me, buddy. Isn't that what you wanted?" Rick Kennedy is a multiple identity shapeshifter who has assumed various personas over the years to protect the various murders and crimes he has committed. He has never been caught, but now is on the run. He's kidnapped his own son, Ricky, but it's only a matter of time before Rick and Ricky are found. Rick couldn't tie up this loose end, and this court supervisor was able to provide the car description, the license number, and most importantly, the identity of the kidnapper. Now the only thing police have to ask is, where are they going? Los Cruces, New Mexico. Rick doesn't get far. While getting gas at a service station just across the state line, he is recognized immediately by an attendant who has seen the Amber Alert on his phone. The attendant calls 911 while pretending to help another customer. Police arrive within minutes, surrounding the gas station with weapons drawn. Rick considers his options, none of them good. He could try to flee, risking Ricky's safety in a high-speed chase. He could use his son as a hostage, becoming the very monster he's tried to convince himself he isn't. Or he could surrender, facing the consequences of not just this crime, but potentially all the others that came before. In the end, it's Ricky who makes the decision for him. "Daddy, why are those police officers pointing guns at us?" the boy asks, his voice small and frightened. Rick looks at his son, this innocent child who somehow loves him despite everything and makes the only choice he can. He raises his hand slowly and is arrested without incident. While Rick is in custody, investigators make some shocking discoveries. His fingerprints match those of Richmond Gruber in Kentucky, tying him to the murder of a college administrator, Don Spicer. Police also match him as the missing suspect in the murder of John Hawkins over 7 years ago. The authorities charge the shapeshifter known as Rick Kennedy for kidnapping and aggravated assault, Richard Regal for using a false name and information used for criminal intent, Rich Roberts for murder, and Richmond Gruber for murder. He is sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. After years and years, the man originally known as Richmond Gruber is finally taken down for dozens and dozens and dozens of crimes. If it hadn't been for wanting to be with his son, he'd still be out there, maybe not as rich, but he'd be free. Ironically, it was humanity that brought an inhuman shapeshifter to justice. The love for his son, the one genuine emotion in a life built on deception, became the trap that finally ended his reign of terror. Today, Richmond Gruber remains in a maximum security federal prison where he refuses all interview requests and maintains his silence about the full extent of his crimes. Kelly has changed her son's name and relocated to an undisclosed location, determined to give Ricky a chance at a normal life untainted by his father's legacy. And somewhere in Germany, an elderly couple still waits for news from their son who went to America to pursue a dream and never returned, unaware that the ambitious young man they raised became one of the most calculating killers in recent criminal history. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Silent Crime Witness. Your support allows us to continue bringing these important stories to light, stories that might otherwise remain untold. Comment your location below and share your thoughts. How far would you go to protect someone you love? What warning signs might have saved Denise Hawkins or Kelly Davis from falling victim to this master manipulator? Remember, sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones who seem most normal, most charming, most like us. Stay vigilant and stay safe. Until next time, this is Silent Crime Witness, bringing the darkness to light.